Good afternoon, teacher. My name is Lisette Stephanie Alvarez Lopez, and I am going to talk about the French education. Each country's education system differs from the other since there are many aspects to look at. The French education system is particularly known for being complicated when it comes to different categories and types of diplomas and tests. The French schools are known for being strictly educational, meaning they don't have much extracurricular activities at least related to the school. They don't have much funding due to the low or no cost of tuition. No school dances or major events, no posters like you see in the other schools in Europe. It is very common in French to repeat a school year if the students don't achieve the average grades they need to pass the classes. The French education system consists of three stages: primary education, secondary education, and higher education. Primary education, while a daycare of kindergarten are not mandatory. From the age of 6, all children must enroll in school. Primary school consists of 5 years of study, from the age 6 to 11, similar to a U.S. elementary school. Secondary education. After primary school, students move to secondary school, which is divided into two stages. The college, middle school, is composed of 4 years of study for student ages 11 through 15. Students receive a brevet test college upon its completion. The lycée, high school, of the final 3 years of secondary education, students then take an examination to receive the baccalaureate high school diploma. Higher education. After high school, students choose either a vocational diploma or an academic diploma. Vocational diplomas, the DUT, the Diplôme Universitaire de Technology, and BTS, Brevet de Technicien Supérieur, are 2-year technology-oriented degrees. BTS courses are offered by high school, whereas DUT are awarded by universities. A DUT or BTS may be followed by one additional qualifying year of study, leading to a licensed professional. Academic diplomas. There are 3 types to higher education in France: universities, grandes écoles, and specialized schools. Universities. University study leads to degree in many fields. Degrees are 3 different levels of achievement: license, master, and doctorate. Grandes écoles. Grandes écoles are similar to universities, but typically offer a more specialized 3-year course of study in subjects such as engineering, business, or public administration. Specialized schools. Specialized schools are public or private institutions that train students for professional careers in specific fields, such as art, architecture, social work, or tourism. They offer license and master degrees too. Thank you very much.
With the promulgation of the degree law in 1959, education was made compulsory and free from the age of 6, first grade of primary school to 16 second grade. As we mentioned, public education welcomes practically 80% of the students. On the other hand, the state offers financing to part of private institutions through concert or contract. The French educational system comprise 2 stages: the first grade, premier degree, and the second grade, second degree. The latter constitutes secondary education, which is supported by priority education centers. These centers are attended by students who show undisciplined behavior or poor integration in the classroom. At the beginning of the 60s, the French school already received help from the Delegation of Education and Science for its maintenance, but it was in 1983 when the full educational agreement was signed with the Delegation of Education and Science of the Junta de Andalucía. This supposed that not only restructuring of the teaching French classes, but also the adaptation to the demands of the new educational system. At this time, the maintenance of the teaching activity in the building on calls abate is impossible. They decide to create a labor stock company, and this proceed to creation of the teaching French classes, but also the adaptation to the demands of the new educational system. At this time, the maintenance of the teaching activity in the building on calls abate is impossible. They decide to create a labor stock company, and this proceed to creation of a new school on the grounds of the airport polygon. Education was a privilege of the well-to-do class of a society. Let's go not forget that the origin to the refers to free time in the first instance, something that Saul, for example, did not have. It took many years for the school to open up a society. As a whole, the first free public took place in 1597 and was founded by Spanish Protestant José de Calens. From the French Revolution, which imposed the notion education of right school, began to consider it a matter of state at the end of 18th century and beginning in the 19th century. The educational system began to differentiate in the each country logically the development of the public school at the hands of the state depending on the historical moment and each nation. But the foundation of this new trend were a universal compulsory free and free education. Thank you.
Education in the past of France. French education, as in other countries, began in schools funded by religious before the Revolution. These schools were confessional and were controlled by the clergy. In 1684, Juan Bautista de la Salle made one of the Greek school foundations. This school funded by him covered elementary education and the secondary, professional, and teaching profession. Another characteristic of French education in the past was the centralization of its system, ignited by the Republic and strengthened by the Napoleon's times. The decrees of 1792 and 1793 assigned to the state a primary role in education, which allowed France to benefit from one of the most advanced systems of training. The idea of this educational model was to teach boys astronomy, literature, writing, calculus, and science to train them as future administrators and officials of the empire. Modern Age. During the Modern Age, the University of Paris was one of the first universities in Europe in the 1150s, giving rise to the baccalaureate diploma, which was forbidden for women at the time, where they were developed in parallel in France. Revolution. In the French Revolution, the universities of the Antiguo Regime were closed, the faculties controlled by the court were reduced, and the French educational system was reorganized once again. This new system established the following. Secondary education will be extended in some cities of France, while higher education will be a privilege only for nobles. Access to university will be simple without barriers, where they were reorganized for categories: medicine, law, science, and humanities. 19th century. In this period, Greek schools of higher education were founded with the objective of supporting industry and commerce. Among these schools was the École Supérieure de Commerce de Paris, ESCP, founded in 1819. In addition, laws were established allowing free, secular, and compulsory education for all. 20th century. In 1987, the Vocational Baccalaureate was created. A few years later, allowed to obtain a diploma of vocational studies or a vocational aptitude certificate to complete the secondary education. A pair has to undertake higher studies. In 1994, the baccalaureate was regrouped into three general tracks: literature, economics, and social science. Then three more specialties were created: art, geopolitics, and informatics. Thank you.
Conclusions of France education. Teaching in France was characterized from the establishment of forced schooling during the 19th century by the so-called French Republic School, secular, public, and forced, which was developed as an important component of the French Republic. With the church-state division and as a tool of national conscience, including the generalization of the use of the educated or academic rule of the French language, a conception of elitism based on intellectual meritocracy, and a high degree of demand both in the recruitment of teachers and students, were oriented to the formation of the leading cadres of the bureaucracy, the company and university teaching and research. In the second half of the 20th century, an intense transformation was created, linked to social and intellectual change. The expansion in age of forced schooling and the growth of the heterogeneity of the structure of the students due to immigration and degradation of the property of the huge towns, with uprooting and lack of social union accentuated in the so-called second generation. France is the third territory in the world that receives more foreign students, around 250,000 students every year. French educational institutions offer a wide range of training processes, both in the public and private fields, to which students from each part of the world can enter, who meet certain specific requirements that vary according to the educational organization. The public universities of France are named after the primary localities near which they are located, followed by a number if there are any. Paris, exemplifying, has 13 universities, labeled as Paris 1 to 13. Certain of them do not remain in Paris itself, but the suburbs. In addition, most universities have adopted a more informal name that is often that of a useful person or a special space.
Created using Powtoon. France education. The French education system has been divided in three main stages: school, college, and high school. Primary and secondary education is free, neutral, secular, and compulsory from age 6 to 16. École maternelle lasts 3 years and is divided into petit section, moyenne section, and grande section. The Ministry of National Education and Higher Education and Research have monitoring and approved the content of each subject. According to the PISA report, French schools are above the percentage of OECD countries in terms of scientific skills, reading comprehension, and mathematical skills. In addition, in France, public schools have passed approximately 80% of the students of compulsory school age, ensuring labor market integration through required internships in higher education and in a general approach to entrepreneurship. The French education system comprises two stages: the first grade, premier degree, and the second grade, second degree. The second integrates secondary education, which is supported by priority education establishment. These centers are attended by the students who have shown undisciplined behavior or poor integration in the classroom. Pre-primary education, which would correspond to the first cycle to the first grade education, separated into the petit section 3-4 years, the moyenne section 4-5 years, and the grande sections 5-6 years. In the first two sections, students are encouraged to develop their personality and their relationships with their environment. In the third section, the aim is to prepare the students for primary schools, where they will learn to read, write, and calculate. Primary schools, it is composed of the second cycle and the third cycle. Primary education has included the first grade and elementaries, with which 5 courses choose the students between the age of 16 and 11. The second cycle consists of the preparatory year, CP, and the elementary first C1. The Vocational Baccalaureate was created in 1987, which allowed a diploma of vocational studies or a certificate of vocationality to be obtained to the complete secondary education. Between 1987 and 1995, the number of baccalaureate graduates increased from 300,000 to 500,000. From 2019-2020, following the reform, all students have had common Subject French, philosophy, history, and geography. Moral and civic education.
Created using Powtoon.